It's 6 p.m. Eastern. It's time for the wrap. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, joined by my co-host and former senatorial campaign manager for Ted Cruz. Really? Is that true? Wow. Forbes columnist Rick Unger is here as always.
Oh, it's so not true.
Not true. Also, she is one of Philadelphia's top attorneys, and Carly Fiorina's, wow, Thelma to her Louise. Heather Hansen, welcome. And finally, new to the Daily Wrap, but certainly not to Newsmax TV. He's an attorney and also a frequent guest on the great John Lieberman's Live at 5 on Sirius XM Radio.
Hey, you got to plug it there. Look at that.
And no one knows why she got a plug in there, but we'll have to explain that later in the show. It's time for the Daily Wrap. Or the Daily Download, whichever you prefer. Well, folks, finally, someone has officially announced they're running for president. And that someone is the aforementioned Senator Ted Cruz.
I believe in you. I believe in the power of millions of courageous conservatives rising up to reignite the promise of America. And that is why today I am announcing that I'm running for President of the United States.
Wow, Mr. Cruz making the announcement at a packed house at Liberty University this morning. But before we talk about it, gang, since the Daily Wrap is all about efficiency, here is a 20-minute speech by Mr. Cruz in about 90 seconds.
Imagine in 2017, a new president signing legislation repealing every word of Obamacare. Imagine a simple flat tax that lets every American fill out his or her taxes on a postcard. Imagine abolishing the IRS. Imagine a president that finally secures the borders. And imagine a legal immigration system that welcomes and celebrates those who come to achieve the American dream. Imagine a federal government that stands for the First Amendment rights of every American. Imagine a federal government that works to defend the sanctity of human life and to uphold the sacrament of marriage. Imagine a federal government that protects the right to keep and bear arms of all law-abiding Americans. Imagine a federal government that protected the privacy rights of every American. Imagine embracing school choice as the civil rights issue of the next generation. Imagine a president who stands unapologetically with the nation of Israel. Imagine a president who says, I will honor the Constitution, and under no circumstances will Iran be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. Imagine a president who says we will stand up and defeat radical Islamic terrorism.
So I actually had a friend watch the speech today, and he did the Ted Cruz drinking game, right? And every time he says imagine, you have to do a shot of Patron, tequila. He's dead now.
He's dead now,
yeah. Anyway, there it is, the whole speech. Sure beats sitting there for 20 minutes, that's for sure. Speaking of which, did you see how packed that auditorium was? Well, that event was mandatory for all students, kind of like freshman orientation in English 101. Anyway, Rick Unger, the senator, sure seemed to hit a lot of notes. We know what the bumper sticker will be. Imagine.
Yeah.
Right? Don't you wish his name was Tom, though?
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if he was paying royalties to John Lennon.
I was thinking
you know?
the same thing.
I don't know if he's going to do Imagine in the same breath, though, as John Lennon.
He makes a good point.
It was kind of a combination of John Lennon meets Michelle Bachmann. Look, imagine that he actually announced that he was running for president, like every other person that I could find in the history of our country, by not going to a religious institution to do so. Nobody else has ever done that. And imagine that the first 3 minutes or 4 minutes of the speech, which we didn't really have, did not make me feel, somebody who was not raised Christian, as if he couldn't care less about me. I thought when you run for president, you're running for president of all the people. I understand that he's appealing to his evangelical base, and that's all great. But I just felt like, well, you're not even talking to me because I'm not a Christian. It was really disconcerting. I mean, no, I'm not the world's biggest Ted Cruz fan, I admit that. But I did think when you run for president, you want to be everybody's president.
Interesting.
He didn't.
Every answer moving forward, just so we know, has to start with imagine.
Imagine.
Okay. So, Heather, could you imagine a President Ted Cruz?
No. Imagine a president who's eighth in the polls right now. He's eighth amongst the potential Republican candidates.
Why?
I think a big part of the reason is he's not running on the things people care about. You know, back in October 2014, Wall Street Journal did a poll, now this was some time ago, asking Americans what they care about, and only 8% said Obamacare, and I know we're going to talk about that a little later. That was one of the first things he spoke about, and that was before ISIS really became to the forefront of people's concerns. So I don't think what he is most concerned about are the things that people really care about and that they can invest in and get behind a president for. I just don't see that being the case.
Adam, I imagine you have a tremendous answer here as well.
Imagine that Rick is not happy that Ted Cruz is running and feels alienated from
I
him.
actually am happy he's running. As a Democrat, it's the best thing that could ever happen to
No,
us.
there's no surprise here. When you watch this, he's appealing to his base. He played the textbook play here. He went before a base. Everyone's going to scream and yell in support. He's going to go through his litany in the menu checklist. Okay, conservative point 2 and 3. He's going to go down it, and he's playing it safe. And he's going to hope he builds momentum from that. He doesn't care if he's appealing to people that are in the middle, to the left. He's not looking to appeal to you, Rick.
Yeah.
Not to hurt your feelings, but he's not
No,
looking to appeal to you. He's
you're
got a
supposed to-
he's got a sector he's looking to appeal to. He did that.
You're
So
supposed to pretend you want to be everybody's president. Even
he doesn't
if
have
you
to do
don't.
that yet. He wants to energize his base first. If the base isn't energized, nothing else is energized.
You know who he's appealing to, and that is the so-called liberal media. Okay, because the reactions today, MSNBC, you saw champagne corks flying out. Because they finally got that caricature of the Tea Party extremist kind of president. Let me read you a couple of quotes. Jonathan Alter on MSNBC said today that Cruz's speech was, quote, "extremism is good," which of course was not the quote. Casey Hunt, who is actually NBC's political correspondent, said Cruz's Ivy League degrees might not appeal to the GOP base. Oh, because, Republicans don't like smart people. And Donnie Deutsch, who somehow remains on TV, says that Mr. Cruz is the new Sarah Palin. So, if anything, a Ted Cruz candidacy will be very entertaining, and only if you can imagine. We only have 15 seconds, so I just want you to imagine this. Ted Cruz versus Elizabeth Warren. The ratings for that.
Yeah.
Boom, the extremes of both
happening.
sides.
Yeah.
Probably not, but it's fun to think about or to imagine. Coming up next, Obamacare hits its 5-year anniversary. Wow, are you feeling any better? This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha with co-host Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, also with us, and as always, and new to the Wrap, I believe he played Eric Stratton, really, in the off-Broadway production of Animal House, attorney Adam Thompson. So today marks the 5-year anniversary of Obamacare. As you may recall, the president had lofty goals when he proposed the law back in 2009.
If you like the plan you have, you can keep it. If you like the doctor you have, you can keep your doctor too. The only change you'll see are falling costs as our reforms take hold. I've also made it very clear to Congress that we must develop a plan that doesn't add to our budget deficit. My budget included a historic down payment on reform, and will work with Congress to fully cover the costs through rigorous spending reductions and appropriate additional revenues. We'll eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in our healthcare system, but we'll also take on key causes of rising costs, saving billions while providing better care to the American people.
Sounds pretty good, but the president, as we know, wasn't able to execute on some of those promises.
But for the average person, many of folks who don't have health insurance initially, they're going to have to make some choices, and they might end up having to switch doctors, in part because they're saving money. But that's true. If your employer suddenly decides, we think this network's going to give a better deal, we think this is going to help keep premiums lower, you've got to use this doctor as opposed to that one, or this hospital as opposed to that one.
Okay, so the fact that some of those guarantees were not met wounded Obamacare, but so did one of its architects. You know him as Jonathan Gruber, who was paid over $2 million taxpayer dollars to make sure the bill passed.
This bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay, so it's written to do that. in terms of risk-rated subsidies. If you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Okay, just like lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to get anything to pass.
The stupidity of the American voter. That certainly resonated for a while. And while Americans seem to be warming up to Obamacare, public approval is still underwater. According to a new Kaiser health tracking poll conducted in March, nationally, 43% had an unfavorable view, while 41% approved. So let's welcome to the panel health policy expert Grace Marie Turner. She is president of the Galen Institute in Washington, D.C. Grace Marie, we're now 5 years later. America seems evenly divided on Obamacare. Are you surprised by this recent poll?
I'm not surprised. We've been doing a number of focus groups, and right and left, people are starting to feel the impact of this law personally. And it is not going to get any more popular. It's no more popular today than the day it passed. People are feeling the impact in their pocketbooks. They now know that they couldn't keep the coverage they had. They couldn't keep their doctor. They weren't saving $2,500 a year for a family. In fact, it's costing them $3,000 more on average. Their deductibles are sky high, so high, in fact, that many people say they're paying their premiums and they still can't afford to go see a doctor. Plus, this is costing us, the country, at least $1 trillion in new taxes, and it's cutting Medicare, $716 billion. Seniors are starting to feel the squeeze, particularly those on Medicare Advantage. The small business community is having incredible dislocations because of the employer mandate that forces them to cut hours to 30 hours a week for a full-time worker, or pay a huge fine. So there are so many ways in which the American people now know they were lied to get this bill passed. It was passed as a political agenda. It got everybody to the table, but the American people are now, 5 years later, feeling personally for themselves the detrimental impact of this law.
So, Grace Marie, it's Rick. So,
hi, Rick.
How are you? So tell us something good that's come from Obamacare. Can you pick anything that's happened that is a positive?
Well, there are people who who were having trouble getting health coverage before, people with pre-existing conditions, and now the insurance companies are required to cover them. But there are so many other ways that we could have solved this problem without putting so much government bureaucracy.
What about the percentage of adults dropping to 12.9, the lowest percent of uninsured in this country since we started keeping records? What about the fact that the CBO says that it's played a major role in bringing down the annual deficit? How come nobody ever gives credit for those positive things?
The Medicaid, the way that this has expanded coverage, first of all, many of the people that are enrolled in the Obamacare exchanges were forced into those exchanges because their private plans were canceled because they did not comply with Obamacare.
Right.
The huge majority of the coverage expansion is through Medicaid.
Yeah.
Not every state has decided to expand Medicaid, but that is the worst health care program in the country, and we have expanded it to now covering.
I agree with that.
Grace, to follow
Medicaid?
Yeah.
Grace, to follow up on that point about Medicaid, I think 60% of the new enrollees are actually Medicaid enrollees. We know about the accessibility problems when it comes to Medicaid. Do you think that we've seen the extent of those problems yet, or do you think that's going to take a year, maybe two, before we see a real problem where we don't have the supply of doctors to do these visits and the demand has increased to such a degree that nobody can get in to see their doctor?
We're already seeing it. Hospital emergency rooms are overloaded with people who can't find a primary care physician to see them. We saw this in Massachusetts when they passed Romney Care, a precursor of Obamacare. There was a huge increase in number of people going to hospital emergency rooms. They had insurance, but they couldn't find a doctor to see them. We now know we have a physician shortage of somewhere between 60 and 100,000 physicians that we don't have because they're retiring early. We don't have the capacity in the system to train physicians. So we've done nothing to increase the supply of physicians and hospitals, and yet we're pouring so many more people into the system. then it's going to do nothing but A, cause more waiting lines, as we see in European countries, and higher costs as you start to see the cost pressures, more money going to this system without doing anything to increase the supply.
Well, Grace Marie, we certainly thank you for joining us today from Washington, D.C., and I have a feeling we'll be talking about this more as the 2016 election comes more near, particularly if Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee. She obviously was in charge of a health care initiative under her husband back in 1993 that didn't go so well. So I have a feeling we'll be debating this more. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Coming up next, should fraternities be banned? We will discuss. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV.
Mr. Blutarski, 0.0. Now I want you to tell Mrs. Stratton and Mr. Schoenstein exactly what I'm about to tell you now.
What's that, sir?
You're out. Finished at Faber, expelled. I want you off this campus at 9 o'clock Monday morning.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
I don't know.
Even though Rick says he could disprove that theory. Great John Vernon. Anyway, Animal House, a classic comedy that somehow turns, get this, 37 years old this year, feeling old right about now, about a fraternity that gets kicked off campus for being less than civilized, much like this panel after the show down at Lowe's on 43rd. The movie is tremendous, of course, but the issue of the behavior at college fraternities is becoming a serious one. Welcome back to the Daily Wrap. By now, everyone knows about the Sigma Alpha Epsilon, SAE, at University of Oklahoma doing a racist chant, which we will not play here. Well, as we mentioned last week, a Penn State fraternity is now under investigation for posting nude photos on a private Facebook page of unconscious women. Is it time to say goodbye to the Greek system on college campuses? Bill Maher says yes.
It always struck me as strange that college campuses are where political correctness is the most stringently enforced, and yet smack in the middle are frat houses. These little Vatican cities of depravity that seem to enjoy diplomatic immunity from civilization. There was a time when fraternities fit in with society as a whole, but that day is long gone.
Mr. Maher continues.
Of all the bad things fraternities do, the absolute worst is that they take young people at the exact moment when they should be learning to be individuals and turn them into shit-eating, orders-following group thinkers. Or maybe these guys all independently decided to wear shorts with a blazer and a bow tie.
Yeah, group thinkers, because that's not Bill Maher's audience or anything. Anyway, Adam Thompson, let's start with you. Were you in a fraternity, and should they go away?
Absolutely not. I'm the furthest guy to ever go in a fraternity. I love what Bill Maher said. I'm very big on independent thinking. I don't like the sheep in the herd mentality. I think that's what fraternities breed and what they promote, and what we see coming out of fraternities, particularly in the last several years, is nothing to be proud of. When people used to say they were in a fraternity, maybe it did have a different meaning at some point in time, but nowadays when you say it, the eyebrows go up, people roll their eyes in, and they're like, oh really? It doesn't carry the same meaning that it used to. I wouldn't want to be part of it. My kid, I don't want being part of it. Bad idea. I would not lose sleep if they were gone tomorrow.
Interesting. Now, obviously, Heather, you weren't in a fraternity. Were you in a sorority?
I was not, but my school had a big sorority contingent, American, for undergrad, and then Villanova for law school they did too. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there's a tradition to it. I do think that these things happen on sports teams. You see hazing on sports teams. You know, it's bad apples. You see bad people in every community, and I think that the idea that by getting rid of fraternities, we're going to get rid of it altogether, it just doesn't make any sense. I think that the business model, the market will take care of it if it must, because at some point schools' liability is going to be so high for these different events that they're not making enough money through the housing and through alumni donations that it will be in their best interest to not have fraternities anymore. But I don't think you should outlaw it or make them go away. I mean, they do a lot of good, and there's a lot of good people who are in these fraternities and sororities.
Mr. Unker.
Obviously, pundits are not fraternity sorority people. I wasn't a frat guy either.
Which is interesting because I visited Ohio State my sophomore year, and
deal.
High Street, and there were 1,000 fraternities.
Oh gosh,
like there is at any big state school.
It is. It's very big. It just wasn't. I used to go to ZBT for dinner on Friday night so I could play touch football with Jack Tatum.
Really?
Yeah, that was the only reason I went. I don't really care, though. I got to be honest with you. One advantage fraternities have is they live in much nicer houses than any apartment that I could afford or the dorms. Okay. So, you know, that aside, if they want to do it, they can do it. Just don't be jerks, which a couple of these fraternities have been behaving like. Otherwise, I just don't really care.
Yeah, I'm with Heather on this one. University of Maryland, Pi Kappa Phi, as I mentioned last week, lived in a house. The houses are not nicer than some apartments.
No.
Well, after
They look like it from the outside.
after certain events,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it was nice. You know, you had a chef come every morning and every night and make you the food. And I still have friends to this day, obviously. But I have just as many friends I met in the dorm. I never based on, well, I only talk to my brothers kind of thing. Look, it's exactly what you said, that then you have to start banning sports teams also, because that's kind of a groupthink mentality as well, right? Put a bunch of guys and have a common cause. The banning of anything scares me, right?
I agree.
Well, I agree with that,
Yeah,
100%.
And Adam, and I made this point last week. It's not that these fraternities are getting any worse. It's because we have the ability to record things like never before. And as I said, this is not just a camera; it's a satellite uplink.
Yeah.
So the minute I tape somebody doing something stupid, then like that, then I could put it out on my Twitter feed, and then it goes viral. And oh my God, what's happening at American fraternities? You know, before maybe you videotaped something and you destroyed the tape. Right? Or you took a picture and, well, that was just in a scrapbook that no one's ever going to see before. Now everybody sees the scrapbook. It's not that the behavior is getting worse, it's the technology is getting better. So I think we're overreacting in these situations. Obviously, SAA, University of Oklahoma, yeah, that's a horrible thing, and they're paying the price for it. Penn State, same thing, but it's no worse.
You got the good and bad in everything.
The good and the bad and the ugly. So coming up next, it's potluck time. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. And we always start with the person wearing a shade of orange. So Heather, you get to go for, yeah, that is a bright orange. Not quite Denver Bronco orange, but
working the orange.
more Buccaneers old uniform. Anyway, tangents, go ahead.
My topic today is police departments across the United States are hiring more immigrants, and it raises a number of issues.
Legal or illegal?
Well, it depends. It depends on where you're talking about. So in Hawaii and Chicago, if you have a work permit, so that's all, you don't need to be a legal citizen, then you can be hired. Right now in Nashville, Tennessee, they're looking to change the law because non-citizens cannot be police officers. And they want to change the law to make it so that if you've been honorably discharged from the military, you can be a police officer. I don't think many people would object to that, although I've talked to some people who do.
Really?
Yes, but I don't have any objection to that. However, when you start talking about hiring as police officers who carry a gun and have the right to arrest, people who have work permits and that is all, I think it raises a number of issues, especially given at the beginning of this month, we know that 15 people were arrested who were here as part of President Obama's amnesty who had committed felonies. And so whether or not there's appropriate safeguards in place, there's also questions about the civil servant exam. Are they given any sort of allowance for that examination? Their pension? I think a lot of issues come up when we start allowing people who are not legal residents, legal Americans, to serve in this particular place. But I wonder especially what you guys think about it.
Adam?
I agree with Heather on this. I think that's a bad idea. I mean, there's enough people looking for work out there who are citizens and are qualified that you can look into their backgrounds and check it out. With undocumented illegal aliens, there's so many red flags that go up at once, I don't even know where you would start. But I just think this is a very bad idea.
The problem, the reason this is happening is precisely the opposite. They can't find enough people out there, and that's why they're doing it. Look, with respect to Nashville, anybody who complains about somebody who was honorably discharged because they were serving our country, defending us overseas, then I think they qualified to defend us here at home.
Yeah,
so that's a no-brainer.
ridiculous
I do see the problem, obviously. I do see the problem. But at the same time, while it's easier to check out somebody who's grown up here in the States, you have a potential problem with that too, with domestic terror. So I see the problem. I don't know if it's enough to overcome the need to have police officers.
Well, and I think that if it was just for the reasons that you stated, and I think you're right, police officers are underpaid, they're overworked,
And they can't find
face
enough of them.
they face horrible things,
Yeah.
and they can't find enough of them. And if that were the only reason, then that might be a good enough reason, although I'm not sure. But the other reason that they've cited is to make the police officers more relatable to the communities that they're serving.
right.
And while I see that as an issue, I just don't think that's enough of a reason to overcome all the problems.
That's valid.
There's
I'll
enough
buy that.
minorities out there now that would get that job if it was offered to them and you gave them the
Pay 'em a
training
little
for it.
more.
I think this is just completely bad.
All right. Adam, that'll be the last word as we transition to your first ever potluck. Welcome.
This has been on my mind a lot as a criminal defense and civil rights attorney for over 25 years and with other attorneys here at the table so they could relate. You know, what we've been seeing going on so much now with the UVA case, with an emotionally disturbed man that had a screwdriver and was shot and died after 2 bullet wounds to his chest, and we saw Eric Gardner here in New York. There's such a difference now with how police brutality cases are taking place. And I discussed this with so many people, and they're still not sold on the fact that it's a good idea to have police wear body cams. And I just can't fathom this because there's no logical argument against it. Every moment that the police officer is out of a vehicle, what he does, how he encounters that person will be recorded. The video will speak for itself, as it did in many of these cases. It changes the whole complexion of these cases. It doesn't allow police officers to fudge or make things up. Same for witnesses. Cops are more protected, the citizens are more protected, and in the big picture, it dials everyone down. People will be a lot calmer when they know they're being recorded and everything they say or do is on a tape. But yet there's still people that oppose it, and I'm mystified why. Am I missing something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think that it will definitely, and people just behave better. And I don't mean the police. I mean everybody
Citizens,
behaves better when they know that there's a camera
Look
on.
how we're doing right now. We're
Right.
completely and totally behaved because we know we're being
Normally,
recorded.
we would be
On
acting
camera,
completely
yeah.
differently. Yeah, I don't know what the argument is against it. I know it's the cost, and we're talking about the cost of not paying these police officers, and then to have an additional cost. I think that's a strong argument, but I don't know what other argument there could be against
The
having
cost,
them.
though, is offset, though, right, because of all the lawsuits you avoid as a
Absolutely.
result of saying, but we have this all on
But you
tape.
know-
Oh, maybe I don't want to sue the police department right about now. And the police actually are embracing it, most of
Right,
what I've seen
most of
anyway,
them are.
because they say, okay, you're going to
But
accuse
it's
us of
not.
stuff. We got the tape.
I support the idea, clearly, but it's not the end-all be-all that some people make it out to be. Understand, they're going to wear it right here, right? You're not going to get the full picture of everything. You're going to be relying on other police officers whose cameras are shooting a situation, and they're going to turn around sometimes so it doesn't happen.
And there'll be
Also-
different views,
also-
different clips. And remember,
also-
Eric Gardner was completely on
Exactly
tape,
what I
was gonna
and
say.
no police
And it
officer
didn't
was
make any
indicted in
difference,
that
did it?
case.
That's right.
Yep.
That's what I was going to point out.
Well, it's like Obamacare. Maybe something is better than nothing in terms of footage, right? So, anyway, we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll have more potluck, including my own. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm your host, Joe Conchin. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we share our favorite stories of the day, and I am up next. So, is the NCAA robbing black wealth? As you know, March Madness began in earnest last Thursday around noon. My bracket not looking very good right now, but I'm still in it because I was brave enough to go against Kentucky, and they will lose, or at least be challenged by West Virginia. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about right now. What I wanted to talk about was the fact that every year we got to hear this debate about whether college basketball players, or football players for that matter, should be paid or not. And I've talked about it on the show here before, in case you missed it. I think there should be some sort of stipend. In other words, they're getting a scholarship, yes, and I get their education being paid for. My wife was a college athlete, for instance, and I'm going to tell you, between school and between practice, she had no time to earn any kind of money to, I don't know, go to a movie, get a slice of pizza, maybe take the train home for if somebody's parents, for instance, don't have the money to pay for that. So I think giving them a couple $100 as sort of something to support them makes sense. But now, of course, just like everything else in the world, we got to look through the prism of race when trying to make an argument around even this topic, like we heard on Melissa Harris Perry's show on MSNBC this weekend.
And I'll tell you what's so disturbing about it to me is that when you dispense with the niceties of it all, when we stop trying to speak in politically correct language, what we're looking at is the organized theft of black wealth.
Cut out there at the end, but it's black wealth is what he says, the organized theft of black wealth. Now, here's the problem with that little argument as it pertains to college basketball. There are currently 4,800 college basketball players out there. 40% of them, like at the University of Wisconsin that we're showing you here, for instance, are white. So that comes to 1,800 college basketball players that aren't black. So when you're going to make this argument that, well, college basketball players should be paid and we're robbing black youth of their wealth, you're kind of leaving out the 40% that aren't black. What did this suddenly become a black-white issue? You want to make the argument that college athletes should be paid? Knock yourself out. I just made it. Yeah, maybe they should. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe the scholarship's enough. But since when, panel, do we suddenly have to even make this about black and white? Because that guy, that was a racist comment that I just heard right there, just assumes that all basketball players are black, when in college basketball, 40% are indeed not. Adam.
Yeah, that's nonsense. It's not a race issue. You nailed it, and I agree with 100% with what you said. Student athletes should get paid. I think it's abominable that they don't. When you see coaches making between $5 and $10 million in college basketball, same for the football coaches, they're generating tens, even to the hundreds of millions. There's no reason why they shouldn't get some stipend, because they're devoting all their time to playing the sport.
Yeah, 15 seconds.
Your wife's a white woman, right?
Yes.
So we're talking about women. He's not talking about women. We're talking about white people. It's not just black men who play any of these sports. It's ridiculous.
That's true, Ricky.
Like I said, some people do get through life fat, dumb, and stupid. That was one of the ridiculous comments.
Yes, that was Dave Zirin, everybody, by the way. He's the editor of The Nation. Find him on Twitter and share your thoughts. Rick, you're up.
Today, the United States Supreme Court refused to hear a case that was challenging the Wisconsin voter ID laws. This has been going on for a couple of years. In the state of Wisconsin, you have to have now a picture ID to go ahead and vote, and there are only certain kind of IDs that are permitted. One of them that is not permitted is a student ID. Now, not shockingly, it turns out that of the 300,000 people who don't have that ID, most of them are senior citizens, economically challenged, or of a minority race. So this has been a big issue. Now, I actually approve of the idea of people having photo ID. In fact, I support a national voter ID card. I support it so long as it doesn't cost anybody anything to get it, because then it's a poll tax. Now in Wisconsin, they say you can get the ID for free if you go to the DMV. The problem is that for many people who don't have a copy of their birth certificate, they have to write a decent little check to get that. 40% of the people who don't have one don't drive a car, and in cities like Milwaukee, where you have a huge minority population, they shut down the DMV a couple years ago that was close to them and moved it 60 miles away. So there are games being played. Wisconsin may end up making the biggest case for why we can't make voter ID work instead of the opposite. If you're gonna make it happen, then you've got to be fair about it and not rig the system.
Yeah, I mean, there are parts of what you say I agree with, but the problem is that when you need an ID to cash a check.
You do.
You need an ID to get into most federal buildings. To make it so that you don't need a picture ID to vote.
But remember, those things you just said are not rights that the Constitution bestows on you.
The Supreme Court in 2008 has decided this issue, and that's why Wisconsin denied it. And they decided it based on the fact that these are things they worry about. Voter fraud and voter confidence are so important that you can risk these things in the alternative.
Well, but you're risking the rights of 300,000 people who may not be able to afford to get the card.
But it's not doesn't cost any money. I mean,
it does cost money to get a birth certificate. It does cost money if you don't have a card to get them.
Advertising, which we have to get you right now. Boy, that was a great transition. That's all the time we have, but it's yay or nay next on the Daily Wrap. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's time for yay or nay. First up, the Boston Globe just wrote not one, not two, three editorials about Elizabeth Warren and a possible run for the presidency. The first one is about how Democrats really need her. The second one was about how her run for said presidency would surprise her skeptics. And the third was about how her run would be a credible threat to Hillary Clinton. 3 pleas disguised as op-eds in 24 hours. Is that too much for one newspaper, Rick Unker?
Look, I like Elizabeth Warren. She's not going to run. If she did, I'd certainly be okay with that. But come on. It's ridiculous. You don't do 3 op-eds in 24 hours.
I'm from that area, so I get that paper online, and when I saw it, I was like, why not spread it out? One a day.
Yeah, right,
all in
right,
one
right.
day. It
All
just
in
seemed
one
like
edition.
a big fat
Elizabeth
ad for
Warren
Elizabeth
Sunday.
Warren. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Year a day, Adam Yeager Day.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Nay, nay, nay. Imagine 3 nays.
Wow.
Bring it on back for you.
Imagine.
And, well, we're all in agreement on this one. I am an A as well. It's called consolidation. You could have made all of those points in one editorial, but I guess each writer wanted to really jump in on this one. So go Elizabeth. Rick says she's not running. Anyway, next, I'm just going to let this video speak for itself.
Chicken fries have like a passionate, obsessive following, and a decision like this was way too much for the BK folks to handle. So they decided to find the perfect chicken to decide for them. Who better than a chicken to decide whether or not chicken fries come back to the Burger King menu or not?
This is Gloria. Let's go see what she can do.
Oh, yes, chicken fries. Ooh, no chicken fries.
That was Gloria. She's a 3-year-old chicken from California who has been awarded the difficult task of touring the country and deciding whether or not the people of the town she visits will be able to eat chicken fries. That's right, you heard me correctly. A chicken is deciding whether you get to eat other chickens, which may possibly include members of that chicken's family tree in Fantasy Football League. Not good. This is definitely a sick marketing stunt, but chickens deciding who can devour other chickens, yay or nay. Heather, we start with you.
I think it's gross. You know, I don't like to think about the fact that they're chickens with faces when I eat them, and this just kind of brings that all to mind. I don't think it's a good marketing plan at all.
Rick.
Are we really talking about this?
I thought Burger King was having your way. Now it's having the chicken's way. That's just not right. I gotta vote big nay, big nay.
Outstanding, and not enough energy. That's the only problem. I'm a nay, and you just made me remember a story of when I visited Madrid, Spain. I went to the oldest restaurant in the world. It's called Botín. It's been around since, I don't know, like 14 something. And pig apparently was the big delicacy. But then, so I ordered it, and then the table next to me got it, and you're right, you see the head. And I'm just like, I can't do it, right? So, no, I can't. Right, the visual's bad.
His name and birth certificate and all that.
Wilbur!
Wilbur.
It was Wilbur from Charlotte's Web. Finally tonight, 71-year-old millionaire murderer Robert Durst denied bail today after prosecutors told the judge to go through his lengthy criminal history in order to decide whether he's a flight risk, you think? Officials say Durst stopped using his cell phone and even dumped it weeks before his arrest because he knew police were onto him. The FBI now believes he was planning on fleeing the country, possibly to Cuba. And he even used up to 10 different aliases at the time of his arrest. Police finally also found, a full-face latex mask. Get this, more than $42,000 in cash, enough marijuana for about 300 joints, because you might as well get high if you're running from the police, a fake ID, a real passport, and a .38 caliber rifle with 4 live rounds in case it ever came down to that situation. So what do you guys think? Is Mr. Durst a flight risk, Heather Hansen? You're all lawyers.
Absolutely. The judge found that he was. Listen, when he was arrested before in Texas, he took off and came to Pennsylvania. So he definitely has a history of it, and thankfully the judge agreed, and he is going to stay locked up for the foreseeable future.
Rick, I think we're going to set a record because we're all going to agree with every yay or nay.
I think you guys are only saying this because you don't like that he had marijuana.
Marijuana enough.
I want to know how he was going to get the pot into Cuba, because that wasn't going to go
Adam,
so well.
he had enough pot to supply Cuba, or at least Havana.
Absolutely. Listen, he's cuckoo. I think he's going to go on tour with that Burger King chicken, and they're going to do a road show. I think that's what this is leading to.
Right, but the chicken might be smarter because the chicken wouldn't go into a bathroom with a hot mic and say, I killed them all.
I killed them all, every chicken there was.
I wanted to get your thoughts because we didn't have you on when we discussed this. Can you believe that he got off in Texas way back when for self-defense after he killed his neighbor, chopped him up into little pieces, or her, excuse me, right?
Was it he?
It was a he, excuse me.
I actually
That's right.
watched
He's killed so many people I can't keep track with the genders.
I watched the story over the weekend. I actually
Jinx.
watched
Oh,
the
you
part
did?
of the Jinx that was about that. It's fascinating.
Oh, really? Oh, I got to catch it. That's
mind-boggling to me that a jury just basically discounted that he dismembered somebody, which I think down there was a misdemeanor, ironically. Dismembering someone, a misdemeanor.
As long as he was already dead.
Because it was self-defense, because he was afraid the corpse was going to come out of a grave and choke him.
Just in case that hand rose, I had to cut it off.
Yep.
Just in case.
That's all the time we have, panel. Tremendous job tonight. Great energy. Thank you for joining us at home as well. We'll be back tomorrow night for more Daily Wrap right here on Newsmax TV. I'm Joe Concha saying bye-bye.